Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Adam Interviews, where we are talking with folks from our community who are doing things of note, often in our community. And today I'm going to be talking with someone who's been doing that for 53 years. You've seen his name, you've seen his face. He has really helped to bring our sports world alive in our area, to reflect the sports world back onto us so we have a historical record of it, and he continues to do so. Scott Pitoniak, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Adam. It's always a pleasure.
So I'm so glad we're finally getting to this. We got a chance to talk, you, me, John Kutchko, at the PGA Championship, and I just kept thinking, this guy is just a fount of knowledge, and I suppose after 5 decades of doing this. Before we get to what you have done, let's talk about what you continue to do after all this time. Why do you keep at it?
It's a good question. I ask myself that a lot, particularly like today, like this morning when I got up at 4 o'clock to write a column that it was due for Rochester Business Journal. It's an interesting question. I think I do it because I still love storytelling. I've always gravitated toward that, even as a young person. I think it was an influence of my mom. So I think I just want to keep my hand in it. I do New York Times crossword puzzles, but it's just, I guess this is just another way of trying to keep my mind somewhat sharp in my advanced age and stuff. And plus, I just I'm still intrigued by people's stories, just as you are. Like, how did they get here? Who were the people who influenced them? What were the paths that they traveled, and if they had taken this road rather than that road, and so forth. So I'm still fascinated by that. When I go to the movies or read a book or whatever, those are things that still appeal to me. So I suppose I'm keeping my hand in it because of that, for those reasons.
Yeah, and I think you hit on what I would say is the highlight of your work is that you focus on the human aspect of sports, and you tell the story, which to me is always the most interesting part of it. You said you got that from your mom. Was she a writer, a storyteller?
My mom was a voracious reader. She was one of these people who would have 5 books going at one time.
Yeah.
All different genres. And she had this incredible ability to distill the stories in just such a wonderful way. And so I guess, through osmosis or whatever, I kind of gravitated toward that. Like I thought that was pretty amazing. And she was a very interesting person. She was an English war bride. My dad was stationed in England in World War II and met her over there, and they fell in love and were married, and then she came over here. And so she was just a fascinating person. Like, she was just extremely interested in everything, it seemed. And so I guess that, I didn't realize it at the time. I remember growing up in Rome, New York, that some of my earliest memories are of my mom putting me in a carriage and like wheeling me several miles away to Jervis Public Library. And it seemed to be like she was there every week. And then as I got older and was reading and so forth, I always found libraries to be a wonderful place. I mean, just think the entire world is in there, all these different worlds you didn't know about. So I give her credit, or blame, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And good luck going into a public library and not finding Gary Craig there.
Yes.
So did she have an accent and everything? Like,
yes.
So you had family in England, I'm
Yeah,
guessing?
yeah. It's interesting. 2 years ago, 2023, 3 years ago now, my wife Beth and I, she's an Anglophile, we took a visit to Scotland and England. We spent like 12 or 13 days there. And my mom was from the Cumbria, the Lake District. It's a beautiful part of England. It's just south of the Scottish border. I met cousins I had never met before over there.
Wow.
In Lake Windermere and so forth. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, the funny thing was, like, my friends would come over to our house, and, my mom's accent was second nature to me.
Yeah.
And, afterwards they go like, oh, your mother's got this accent and so forth. And so I would tell my mom about it, and she would say, well, no, you folks are the people who have the accent because it is English, the language and stuff. So, yeah, that was wonderful. And I got to find out a little bit more about the family history when we were over there. And I come to find out that my grandmother, my mom's mother, had worked in a munitions plant during World War I in England.
Mm.
And then later, my mom. So they were kind of like two Rosie the Riveters,
Wow.
English versions of those. Because if you think about it, but during those wars, it was all hands on deck. Like
Right.
everybody had to chip in, and all the men are away fighting, and the women are working in the munitions plants. It was quite common. But to learn some little nubbits that I didn't know, and my mom's been gone a long, long time. But I wish, you just wish that you could ask them things, your parents things. Long after the fact.
Yeah, no, look, that's one of my passions. I was able to interview my grandparents before they passed. And, I look back, or I listen back to what I asked, and I said, oh, I should have asked this. I should have asked that. But so you go to Syracuse University, and your passion never died for Syracuse. I'm going to jump ahead. I want to talk about the DNC and your work there. But one of your latest works is Invisible No More, where you feature, and I apologize if I get the name wrong here, Wilmeth Siddhat Singh.
You've got it right.
Did I get it right? Okay.
You got it right.
So a two-star athlete who hid his race, from what I understand, so he could play in the 30s and then became a Tuskegee Airman.
Yeah.
What a find. How is this story not? It's one of those things you must think to yourself, how is this story not told?
Yeah. A friend of mine who's a professor at Syracuse and also was at Syracuse around the time I was in the late 70s, Rick Burton and I stumbled upon this. We had collaborated on some other projects, including the official history of Syracuse University, the 150th anniversary of Forever Orange. But anyway, we stumbled upon this, and we just go, this is incredible. And we had actually started out thinking of this as a documentary or a feature film.
Right. I see it.
That's not easy to do, and we struggle with that. So we just said, well, let's write it as a historical novel, because we wanted to get inside Wilmeth Siddhat Singh's head, and what he was thinking, how he was handling the racism at that time. In the late 30s, Adam, students of color could not live on campus at Syracuse University, and here's this big star. He was beloved by his fellow students and so forth, but you still had this kind of discrimination going on, and he overcame it all. He was an incredible two-sport athlete, basketball and football at Syracuse, one of the first black quarterbacks at a predominantly white school in the United States, was feted for leading this incredible upset in a game in which Grantland Rice, the most prominent sports writer in America, who was syndicated in every newspaper in America. So you would go, in those days, that's how you went viral, no internet and so forth.
Right.
And he sang the praises, compared him to the kind of the Tom Brady and Josh Allen of the day. And yet, in those days, he would never have the opportunity to play in the NFL because there was a ban against players of color back then. So, and on top of all that, he grew up in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance, personal friends of Cab Calloway. There's a Rochester connection.
Wow.
And so many others. Joe Louis. He's buried in a non-segregated part of Arlington National Cemetery. So he was a huge, huge hero, but unfortunately, he was killed in a training accident and kind of disappeared from history. So there's just so many elements and layers to his story that we were fascinated with. So then there's still some outside chances. We've had some nibbles here and there about people who they've read the book and see it as a feature film. One of these incredible stories, kind of like Hidden Figures, that we didn't realize about these African-American women who were the brains behind the computations for NASA and our space program well before computers were developed to the extent that they are now.
So did I misread that, by the way? Did he have to hide his race at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he did. What happened was, and it was not a proud moment, certainly for Syracuse University in that, because his biological dad was African American, and he died when Wilmeth was, I think, 6 or 7. His mom remarried an Indian doctor.
I see. Okay.
And so they had the name Siddhat Singh. Because he was somewhat light complected, they were able to pull off this ruse. And people say, well, why did he go ahead and do this? Well, you have to understand this was a much, much different America. And it was a time when, he wanted his scholarship. So he played along with the ruse. He wasn't really pleased about it, but, and everybody in the African-American community knew that he was black.
Mhm.
But he wanted to get his degree. He was a brilliant student. He was a pre-med student. And you just think about and we interviewed so many people and did so much research and stuff. And you just wonder, like, all these people were just raving about him had he lived, how
Right.
high he might have
Right.
climbed in life, but it didn't happen.
My goodness, that's and oddly enough, concurrently with this, this Black History Month, I'm doing a story. I already did the interviews with those who are doing a project to honor Leland Pennington in our area, who was a multi-sport athlete for a local high school, and he went off was a Tuskegee Airman, and his plane went missing over Italy or Czechoslovakia and was never heard from again. His relatives are still around here, and
Wow.
incredibly good-looking guy, smart, charismatic, good friends with Charlie Price, who I'm sure you
Mhm.
got to know along the way. He was with RPD for a long time, but anyway, I'm so glad, and as a storyteller, whenever I get a story like that, I'm like, I get eager because I think someone's going to like beat me to it. I'm like,
Yeah.
I found a gem of a story that no
Yeah.
one's been.
No, I've never heard of it. I'm like, that's one I'll definitely be paying attention
Yeah.
to and stuff. And yeah, those are I think I think, you have the same desire, like if you can find these like off the beaten path stories. And, the Wilmot Siddhat Singh story really appealed to us because, again, it's lost history. And you're going
Yeah.
like, this is a story that needs to be told. And it's, hiding your identity and doing things like that. It's a story set in the 1930s that sadly is a story that we're still dealing with in 21st century America here, where we're still trying to come to grips with so many things as a country. Yeah, so I love those stories. I
Yeah,
really do.
no, paying for the sins of our fathers, to be sure.
Mm.
You were at the DNC, and when you were there, I really started to, I picked up the DNC in the 90s when I was in high school, and that's when I really started. And the Titans there, Leo Roth, Bob Matthews,
Yeah.
what was that like to be part of that troupe at the time?
It was wonderful. I'm really, it really, bothers me to see what's happened to newspapers and the deterioration and death and so forth of newspapers and stuff. But I always say, like, I was there at a golden era. We had a lot of characters. We had an awful lot of fun. And I thought we put out a great newspaper. I thought we punched above our weight, in terms of we could compete with some major metropolitan newspapers. And we had a bunch of people there that had offers to go to bigger places. But it was great. I look at my own situation, and I turned down some offers to go to New York and St. Louis and Washington and so forth, because I had a pretty good gig. I got to cover 5 Olympics. I got to cover like 8 Super Bowls and stuff. And I got to do a lot of the niche stories that I wanted to do, the off the beaten path stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So, I stayed, and I'm so happy I did. But it was a fabulous time. I think we all took a tremendous amount of pride in what we were doing. And it could get really hairy at times. You could do a sitcom, and some of the things that would go on in newsrooms, but it was, like I said, it was a ball of fun. And I'm just so blessed and grateful that I was a part of it for, the number of years that I was.
And obviously your work with the professional sporting teams has been noted, whether it was the Bills, the Red Wings. At the same time, I'll tell you as a high school athlete, what that team did for us, just making sure the box scores were correct the next day and doing profiles of this athlete, it made people feel very special. It was a wonderful public service.
Yeah, I think, I give great credit to, and there were people there well before me, but the coverage of high school sports. And beyond that, Adam, I think the coverage of women's sports, I think we were really, really ahead of the curve on that. And, I think it was a great thing, for the newspaper to get behind that and then to expand that coverage. And I got involved in some of that too, even as a columnist, like, hey, I always told the high school writers, like, if you got like something, please, and you can't get to it, let me know, fill me in, and I'll go after it. And I did many times, and I think that was one of the really strong suits of the paper at the time, was the coverage that was devoted to local athletes. And I think you need to do that. I really do, and to grow your readership and so forth.
Yeah, no question. So speaking of the professional sports, I was told I have to ask you about Tanya Harding.
Yeah. So I covered 5 Olympics.
Yeah.
And before I covered my first Olympics in 1994 in Lillehammer, Norway, Jerry Langdon from Gannett News Service, I was going to be part of the Gannett News Service team to write for the 150 Gannett newspapers across the country. And he goes, I'm going to assign you, and I was all excited. He goes, and I'm going to assign you to figure skating. And I said, well, Jerry, I go, I'd be more than happy. I'll cover anything you want me to. I go, I don't know anything about figure skating. He goes, I don't care. He goes, you always write about human beings. Just go write about human beings. Now, this is before the internet and so forth. So I get all these, I get a package of clips, newspaper clips on various competitors at the U.S. Nationals, which were being held in Detroit a couple months before the Olympics in 94 in Lillehammer. And so I'm going through and I'm trying to find things, that interest me. I want some really off the beaten path. And I come across this stuff on Tanya Harding, that she's not your stereotypical figure skater. She's she could take an engine apart, put it back together, and, she comes from a lower, economic status, and stuff like that. So I go, I'm all over this. So I go there, and they have practice sessions going on in Cobo Arena. It's connected to Joe Louis Arena. And, I'm the only one, right? I'm the only one, as she comes off the practice rink. And we're going towards the locker room. And you know how it is, Adam. You can sense sometimes when you're doing an interview and somebody's like kind of too much in a hurry, like they don't want to do the interview and so forth. And so now you've got to kind of adjust, and you've got to try to let's see, how can I literally break the ice here and try to slow her down and so I can get to my interview and stuff. And it's just not working. I'm trying everything, and she just keeps moving. And she's just giving me terse answers and so forth, to the point where I know once we get to the locker room, I'm toast. I can't go in the locker room, and then she just goes in. So now I'm lost. I don't have a story. I got to come up with another idea. I got to go back to the media room and so forth. I go back to the media room, and about an hour later, a columnist who I was sitting next to from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette shows up, and she's like ashen. And I go what happened? And she goes, she was just down there to do a piece on Nancy Kerrigan. Well, she was there with the television crew in the walkway when the hit happens, where they bash Nancy Kerrigan on the shin. She goes down, and so we're thinking at first, we're all thinking in the newsroom there, well, this is like only months after the stabbing of Monica Seles on a tennis court, if you remember that, where, and it was a deranged fan out there that did it. So we're all thinking deranged fan, we're thinking security breach. We don't realize until next week, the following week when things, all stuff breaks, that this is a hit job. This is done by, Tanya Harding's husband and some of his friends and stuff like that. They've done this to try to literally take out the competition. And that's when, all of a sudden, I have a front row seat to the biggest story in the world. When the Olympics go, this is I'm one of 50 credentialed reporters covering the third most watched Olympic event in history is that night of that. And we have to, all the stuff leading up to it as well. But it's, it still ranks as probably the most bizarre story I ever covered. And so all of a sudden, everybody's interested in figure skating, at that point.
Wow. So did she talk to you after it had happened?
No. This was before. So it all makes sense now why she was trying to get out of there, right? Why she was moving as if she was double parked outside.
She's like, I need my alibi.
Yeah. And so I'm the last person to interview Tanya Harding before the hit job, before this bizarro story.
That is crazy. That is crazy. So did you end up, how did you play that during the Olympics? Did you kind of continue that narrative, that story throughout the...
Yeah. What happened was, so when we go over to Norway, now everybody wants to get in on the story, right? All the national columnists, all the national anchors and so forth. Well, they have this small arena where they're practicing over there, and it could probably hold I don't know, 100 people like onto the side of it or whatever. And so you had to get there early, you had to be credentialed and so forth. And all we're doing is essentially watching them practice. Now, the way they practice is like there can be collisions, so we're just like, our whole lives are taken over to watch like is there are they staring at one another? They make eye contact? Are they, is there going to be this fight on the ice? All this, malarkey going on at the time. And so, yeah, so I followed all the way through. And then, but the first night of figure skating is the short program. And then you have the long program
Right.
2 nights later. And, so I was, all these other people were not in the arena. There were only 50 of us that were credentialed to be in. And that's because I went out and covered the Nationals, the U.S. Nationals in Detroit ahead of the Olympics, that I was able to kind of get that credential.
Incredible. What an experience.
Yeah.
So you ended up covering the Bills quite a bit. We had the Super Bowl run, and I got to tell you, that's really, of course, when I started to turn on to it, 93, 94. And this whole sea change over there, or I guess the problem for a lot of people is that there isn't a sea change. You get rid of McDermott, bring in Joe Brady. It just seems to me, I mean, are we just seeing more of the same? I have said the Bills have turned heartbreak into an art form.
Yes.
They just find a new way to lose in almost in more desperate fashion than before. What are your thoughts having covered them for 30 some odd years?
Yeah, this recent thing has been a little bit hard to figure it out. I didn't think they were going to make a change after the latest gut punch
Yeah.
loss again to Denver, and I actually thought that I've had some I've had some reservations about Sean McDermott's
Yeah.
performance in postseasons. That's
Yeah.
his Achilles heel.
Right.
We know it. So, but yet I thought this year, given the circumstances, all the injuries, the roster he was given, that he actually probably had his best year coaching this year, did his best job. So I was blindsided when he was fired. And I really thought that if they were going to get rid of anybody, they should have gotten rid of Brandon Beane, the general manager, because he's the architect of the roster, the main architect. Now, certainly McDermott and the coaching staff has an input in that, but still, it's the general manager that signs off on the draft picks and so forth, and that's under his purview. So now, so then they do that, and believe me, public opinion is by far in favor of Sean McDermott. Believed that he was done wrong. And then you have that awkward press conference with Terry Pagula, the owner,
Right.
and Brandon Beane. And then you also announce that Brandon Beane has gotten a promotion. And so, yeah, it's been kind of discombobulated lately. And look, I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows if Joe Brady may wind up being the best coach the Buffalo Bills ever had.
One can hope.
Or it might be like, you should have really, really gone outside the organization and got a new set of eyes
Yeah.
and ears on this, what's going on here, how to get over it. So it's a little bit confusing right now. Again, I look back, I always try to, I'm a student of history. I try to look back with this team in particular. I was there when Marvin Levy was hired. There was no buzz. He was a retread coach from, who had a little success in Kansas City. Then whatever was going up to Canada and had success in the Canadian Football League, but there was no buzz when he was hired, and he wound up being the greatest coach in the history of this franchise. And let's not forget, when McDermott was fired after the dumpster fire that was Rex Ryan when he was hired, McDermott, there was no buzz there. It was just
Right.
like, you got a guy on the cheap. He wasn't like a sexy candidate out there.
Right.
So maybe it works out. Let's hope so. But the other thing is, Adam, is that Joe Brady walks into a job under incredible pressure.
Yeah.
The heat is incredible. It's Super Bowl or bust. And that's not fair to him,
Yeah.
but it is the reality of it. You needed to make a change, right? Because you were concerned about the meters running, the clock is ticking on Josh Allen's prime years here.
Yep.
And, so this is the change you made. And you went in-house. You interviewed 9 people, and you said, we're not doing anything more. They didn't have 2 interviews, which most teams like call you back for the second interview if they're really serious. So we'll see. I mean, he has had success as an offensive coordinator, but I can tell you that like in 90% of the cases where a coordinator is promoted, it fails. Mm-hmm. It's just like some people are really good coordinators.
Right.
They're good at that level, can't go up to the next level.
Well, we'll see if he passes the test.
Yeah.
I know when you cover sports this long, I've talked with Dad about it too, you can become close with certain characters along the way. You just jive with them in a way that you didn't expect. Was there anybody at the professional level, whether it was the Bills or Syracuse or anybody like that, where you actually became friends with them? You might not have, had them as their best man at your wedding, but like you became friends with them.
Well, the first guy that comes to mind is Marv Levy.
Okay.
Marv Levy was maybe the most unusual football coach I've ever seen. It's a Harvard, master's degree. He's a brilliant guy and tremendous sense of humor. He was a football coach through and through, and he wanted to win in the worst way. He was competitive, and but he just had a way about him. I think, like he wasn't the greatest X and O's guy, certainly as a coach. And you can talk about maybe Super Bowl 25. He certainly they got out coached and outplayed and everythinged. But I think where he was brilliant is that he was a people coach. Mm-hmm. He just really, I mean, those great Bills teams had so many egos, big egos in that locker room that with another coach, they probably would have imploded. A disciplinary coach, this and that. I always heard that, they need a disciplinarian, Mike Ditka, this guy, that guy. But really, it was Levy really knows how to handle people. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I've stayed in touch with him through the years. I continued to write stories about him after he had left the Bills and so forth. And, he's doing television work and whatever. And he just has a great sense of humor. And even now, he's over 100 years old. He just celebrated his 100th birthday. And we email back and forth every so often. And he's just, he asked me, he goes like, so how many books have you written? And I said, I've contributed or whatever, written or contributed to. I said, I think it's, I don't know, it's over 30, close to 40, whatever. He goes, I'm going to start calling you Charles Dickens now. But he's just I just clicked with him. I think everybody did. Like when you went to a press conference with Marv Levy, you always learned something, whether it was a new word, or a history lesson, or about human nature.
I love that. Well, Scott, I wanted to talk about Lou Gramm and your book on him. I wanted to talk about your Yankees children's book because I'm a huge Yankees fan, The Walk to the Ballpark. I wanted to talk about how you and your wife, Beth, are a media power couple in the area, but I'm out of time. So I'm asking you if you would be willing to come back in the near future so we can continue the conversation.
I would love it. I would love it.
All right, beautiful. Scott Pitoniak, legendary sports writer in our area. We thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
All right, so Scott talking about the Bills and the Olympics and the most recent book he wrote regarding a Syracuse athlete that speaks to the racial tensions that we have dealt with and continue to deal with in our country. So kind of a microcosm of a much bigger issue there. Highly recommend you head out, especially if you're a fan of Syracuse University, which I am. On that note, want to say thank you for watching, and I hope that you can tell your friends and family about the Rochester First streaming app as we continue to add bigger and better things to it every single day. All right, everyone, take care. Bye.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.